promoting health and safety as we continue to deal with COVID-19. The board continues to meet virtually. At this time, I will call on Comptroller Henry for any corrections, additions, or noted abstentions to today's agenda.
Thank you, Mr. President. There are no corrections or changes to the agenda. The board has received the following protests on page 50 to 51, item number 3, Bureau of Procurement, B50006251, street tree planting with 2-year maintenance and warranty, fall 2021 and spring 2022. Protests were received from Baltimore Tree Trust and Kim Lane, but this item is being withdrawn. Under deferrals and withdrawals, the following 2 items are being withdrawn. On page 50, item number 1, Bureau of Procurement, B50006235, restoration grade nursery stock is being withdrawn. Page 50 to 51, item number 3, Bureau of Procurement, B50006251, street tree planting with 2-year maintenance and warranty, fall 2021 and spring 2022. This item is being withdrawn. The following items are being moved to the non-routine agenda. On page 12, Department of Law Settlement Agreement and Release. Page 13, Department of Law Settlement Agreement and Release. Page 41, Department of Audits Audit Report. Pages 67 and 68, item number 13, Bureau of Procurement contract number 08000, Shotspotter annual subscription services. Page 69, Office of the City Council, Council Bill 21-0083. No items are being moved to the routine agenda. The board has received the following abstentions from the Honorable Mayor Brandon Scott. On page 42, item number 2, Health Department, agreement with the Johns Hopkins University. On page 47, Health Department ratification of amendment to agreement with Johns Hopkins University. From the Honorable President Nick Mosby on page 9, Office of the State's Attorney agreement with the Center for Hope. On page 10, Office of the State's Attorney agreement with the Community Mediation Center. On page 11, Office of the State's Attorney grant award. On page 55, retroactive travel approval reimbursements, Baltimore City Council. On page 69, Office of the City Council, Council Bill 21-0083. There are no other abstentions, no other no votes. That's all we have, Mr. President.
I would now like to direct the board's attention to a memorandum from my office dated November the 1st, 2021, identifying matters to be considered as routine agenda items, together with corrections and additions that have been noted by our comptroller. I will now entertain a motion to proceed on the items listed in the routine agenda.
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved and properly seconded. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 And all those opposed, please say nay. The ayes have it. The routine agenda is now adopted. We're going to turn to the first item, which is Council Bill 21-0083. If there are no objections from the board, we're going to go a little out of order, as Comptroller Henry spoke about before we got on, to put this item first. We had a request from the Department of Transportation to hear this item on page 69, Office of City Council Bill. The board's being asked to approve Council Bill 21-0083, which would grant a franchise to BG&E to move some gas infrastructure onto Rec and Parks property to facilitate a bridge replacement project by Department of Transportation. At this time, I will turn the floor over to Mr. Liam Davis and Mr. David Frame from DOT to explain the agreement and identify any other representatives of the administration here to speak on behalf of this item. Mr. Davis, I yield the floor to you.
Thank you, Mr. President, and I just want to thank everybody for providing us the opportunity to be here this morning. Liam Davis, Legislative Affairs Manager with Baltimore City Department of Transportation. The long story short here is this franchise agreement is necessary to allow for the Wilkins Avenue Bridge project to move forward. We have secured a letter of support from the local community association And we respectfully ask that this move forward favorably. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Davis. At this time, Mr. Frame or anyone else from the administration would like to speak on behalf of this particular item.
Mr. President and honorable members of the board, I have nothing more to add.
Thank you, Mr. Frame. Are there any other members of the administration that would like to speak on behalf of this item? Hearing and seeing none to the board, are there any questions or concerns at this point? Ms. Comptroller, I see your hand raised. I yield the floor to you.
Thank you, Mr. President. In the briefing that we got from City Department of Transportation on this bill, it became clear that this is really about the installation of a gas regulator station for BG&E in Gwynns Falls Park. And since the park is under the jurisdiction of Rec and Parks, I was hoping someone from Rec and Parks could explain to the board why Rec and Parks did not request this bill and why this ended up coming in from DOT.
I don't want to speak for Rex and Parks. I see we do have Jenny Morgan, but I think the project, the bridge project, is what created the need for the transfer for the station to move. I think that Rec and Park were gracious enough to allow them to move it where it is. But again, I don't want to speak on behalf of the administration or Rex and Park. So if anyone else on the meeting this morning has different information, please speak up.
That was accurate, Mr. President. We were asked to put the bill forward and as a courtesy to DOT because it's on our property.
Okay. Okay. Okay, then let me move on to asking the way franchise fee legislation generally works is that the bill comes before the council with no fee filled into the bill because the charter requires that the Board of Estimates set the fee. But usually there's a recommendation in the bill report from the agency requesting the bill saying what they feel the franchise fee should be. There was nothing in DOT's report recommending a fee. We have since learned that the unspoken recommendation is that because we are working with BG&E on this, that we not charge a fee. And I'm wondering if there was any discussion of this or the amount of the franchise fee at the public committee hearing on this bill. And if not, why not?
Liam, I'm going to defer to you on that.
Sure. I'll be honest, there was a lot of questions that came up during the hearing in the city council, and we did our best to address every question that came up, and the franchise fee didn't come up during the public hearing.
So why aren't we charging a franchise fee?
I think we've been pretty clear in articulating our opinion why, which is in this case, the city went to BGE and said, you need to move your infrastructure because we need to build a new bridge. The bridge needs to be replaced. It has a rating below 50%. And there is a time component to this because federal funding is involved. It's 80% federally funded. And our bridge section estimates this is a roughly $12 to $13 million bridge project. So 80% federal funding, that's a significant chunk of change. So we really just went to BG&E and said, we have a bridge project that we need to move forward with. You need to move your infrastructure. And they've, been a team player, and that's kind of it. There's really not much more to the story.
So we just are not going to charge them a franchise fee because we're the ones who asked them to have to replace the station in the first place.
Well, there's precedent, and I believe we also discussed this, Mr. Comptroller, of existing franchise agreements with no fee. The most recent one is our BGE franchise agreement regarding EV chargers. So I don't think this is necessarily, groundbreaking. The only groundbreaking.
Not saying it's groundbreaking. I'm just wondering if with the EV chargers, were we upfront about that when the franchise bill went before the council? Although, when did the franchise bill, did that go before the council?
It did. It went through the council last year.
Oh, okay.
And that was, again, I don't think the fee portion really came up, and I think the role that when we have a bill that we need to push for a bridge project, that's kind of what I'm focused on is getting that through. And our team, we have a team that works on advancing this legislation. They're advising no fee. And when I'm working to advance that legislation, I have to trust my team, so that's kind of where we are, how we got here. And we need a bridge that needs to be replaced, and we'd all like to see it built.
For what it's worth, I'm not really opposed to the concept of not charging a franchise, given the general explanation of what we're doing and why. What I'm concerned about, and I expressed this concern to the council president, is that there's a process for these in which the time for public input on this is at the council's committee hearing. And that is the point at which the public is supposed to have the opportunity to react or respond to the agency's recommendation for the franchise fee. Because when it comes to the Board of Estimates, there's a little less opportunity for input compared to the ability for the public to participate in city council committee hearings. And so I'm just concerned that, has there been any opportunity for the public to review and comment on the recommendation not to charge a fee? I know I had a chance to have an extensive conversation with DOT about this, but I don't know if other members of the council had that same opportunity. I don't know if members of the public had that opportunity, and I'm just curious as to why that isn't a policy for these types of pieces of legislation.
I think we can take the feedback, for future franchise bills that come through DOT's way. But regarding the public input opportunity for this legislation, I want to say we work with the city council and the council president's office, the chair of the committee, the councilwoman of the district. We work with council people from other districts. We got the original bill hearing called, then it was postponed because there were questions we were answering and there was more time for people to ask questions. So it was rescheduled for a later date. So we definitely went, I feel like above and beyond to be transparent and answer any questions that came up during the city council legislative process. And again, to be quite honest, the franchise fee just didn't come up. That wasn't really the concern from really anybody. Any of the questions we got, there was no question about it. And I think, like, hearing your feedback today, it doesn't mean it's not important. So, I can make a commitment on behalf of DOT that we are more clear about the franchise fees going forward, Mr. Comptroller. So I appreciate the feedback.
I appreciate that. It's the not everybody wanders around being fully aware of the process for setting franchise fees, and so not saying anything in the report may not catch the eyes of the average member of the community. Although I was glad that it was caught here in my office. Can you give us, and Mr. President, I'm almost done. I think the other important piece of information to put all this in perspective is can you tell the board very approximately how much revenue a fee appropriate to this would generate over, I believe this is a 25-year franchise. So what are we talking about over a 25-year period?
So I mean, if a fee is even appropriate here, which again we're saying it's really not, because we couldn't find anything on record that said there was a fee before, but understanding that this had come up, David Fram from DOT Right of Way Division did some research, crunched some numbers. It's not a perfect comparison, but there is a situation where Rec and Parks, I think either leased or there was a franchise agreement, and what it came out to was like $2.50 per square foot. David, can you speak a little bit more to that?
Yes, so not too far from this particular area, there's a franchise that's going through, I don't believe it's presented to the comptroller yet or the city council, for a stormwater outfall near Caton Avenue. And that was appraised, and that came in at $2.50 a square foot. So we extrapolated that out. And Liam, I don't have the numbers in front of me. Do you know how wide the square footage of the gas regulator is, sir?
I'm actually ironically in the office and don't have that in front of me right now too. I'm preparing for this. We have a legislative transit tour this afternoon. That's why I'm downtown. But I think it wouldn't be any more than I'm assuming a couple hundred square feet from what I could see on a map, the map that we have.
Yeah, so I feel like when we had our briefing, the map that when you shared your screen, it was in the 12 to 1,500 square foot, and if you play that out, it's like 3,500 a year, something like that. So over 25 years, we're talking
that's my recollection,
between $75,000 and $100,000.
Yeah.
So it's clearly, I wanted to put that in perspective to make it clear that this isn't about the money. It's just about, the process, because if we start, I don't want to see this be a precedent of not talking about it at the city council hearing, because if that becomes common and accepted, then we may have a franchise in the future that is more substantial, and where the amount of money involved might be a matter of public concern. And I don't want to lose the expectation that the public gets a chance to comment on that. So I just thank you, Mr. President, for indulging me in digging into this.
No, thank you, Mr. Comptroller. And I think, as was stated from Liam Davis at Department of Transportation, there was a tremendous amount of public scrutiny on this particular project, where we even asked the administration in DOT to go back to the community to get the letters of support to ensure that there was some engagement and dialogue. As it relates to this particular franchise fees, I actually think the process worked, because we're talking about it now. It was deferred, it was provided for more time for briefing for yourself and myself and other members of the board. And this board could take action to send this bill back to the council. We've decided not to, because there is a reasonable explanation as to why there was not a franchise fee associated with this particular bill. So I actually think that the process is working. How we will ensure that from a council perspective, and we get in these very unique opportunities, that we'll explicitly spell that out during the hearing and during the public engagement. I really think the process worked. Appreciate the leadership from your office, even to bring us here. Appreciate the willingness of the administration and DOT working with the community and going back to the community to ensure that we had the right level of dialogue and engagement with the community. So again, this is a bill that's been out there for quite some time for a reason. And I appreciate all of the dialogue today. I think I saw the hand of Mr. Theo. Would you like to speak on behalf of this item?
Thank you so much, Mr. President. Thank you, Mr. Comptroller. I think your points are all well taken. We appreciate the opportunity here. The reality is, in fact, that we are looking at this bill from a public safety and definitely infrastructure building perspective. So it's really a transportation perspective, and the franchise agreement and issues that are associated with the bill are in fact as important. But again, from a purely DOT standpoint, part of what we're trying to ensure here is that we would be able to spend federal dollars that are hard to come our way these days. So we do not want to miss the opportunity that we have in planning the reconstruction of the bridge. So in a nutshell, I just wanted to make sure that we all understand the big picture here, but we do appreciate Mr. Controller's point about not setting a precedent here, and we appreciate the opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you so much. At this point, are there any additional questions or concerns from members of this board? Hearing and seeing none at this point, I'll entertain a motion.
Move approval.
Second.
It's been moved and properly seconded. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, please say nay. The ayes have it. This bill is approved. Next item is the settlement with police department involving a shooting. It's on the non-routine. It can be found on page 13, Department of Law Settlement Agreement and Release. This is a proposed settled case. At this time, I'll turn the floor over to the Department of Law to walk us through the settlement. Is Deputy Solicitor Ingram or someone else from the Law Department want to speak on behalf of this item?
Yes, sir, I'm here.
Deputy Solicitor Ingram, I yield the floor to you.
Thank you, sir. Good morning, members of the board, Honorable Mayor, President of the City Council, and Comptroller, and other respective members of the board. I'm Darnell Ingram, and on behalf of the Law Department is requesting this honorable board to approve the settlement in the amount of $230,000 in the matter of plaintiff against the plaintiff against the the plaintiff against Officer Mello regarding a stop that occurred on and about November 22nd, 2016 on the 1000 block of North Monroe Street in Baltimore City. In this particular incident, the plaintiff was driving, in which he was stopped by Officer Mello. Officer Mello then walked to his vehicle, ordered the plaintiff out of the vehicle. During the exchange, he requested backup from other officers, Officer Harrison and Officer Paget. Upon the officer's arrival, Officer Harrison walked to one side and Officer Paget backed up Officer Mello. Upon plaintiff getting outside of the vehicle, when the officers yelled gun, in which Officer Mello discharged his weapon and striking plaintiff in his upper arm. Plaintiff suffered injuries to which he was transported to shock trauma to undergo surgery, and thereafter he had to undergo treatment as well as physical therapy. Plaintiff was incarcerated from November to June, in which he had a criminal charge and trial against him. The charges that were filed against him was possession of a firearm by a convicted felon, second-degree assault, illegal possession of a regulated firearm, carrying or wearing a handgun on his person, possession of a handgun in a vehicle on a public road, resisting arrest, and driving a motor vehicle without a valid driver's license. Plaintiff had a jury. The state attorney's office no process charge of illegal possession of a regulated firearm. The judge acquitted the plaintiff for secondary assault, and the jury acquitted plaintiff of all remaining charges regarding his possession. He, however, was found guilty of driving without a driver's license. Given the circumstances of the trial and the jury verdict in the best interests of the city requests this honorable board to approve the settlement in the amount of $230,000 for the plaintiff in this matter. Thank you.
Mr. Ingram, what is the settlement amount?
I'm sorry, sir?
The settlement amount again. What was
I'm
the
sorry,
settlement?
$230,000.
$230,000. Got you. Was a gun recovered?
Yes, the gun was recovered. So there's he say, she say, the officer said they saw the gun, which is why the officer yelled gun. The plaintiff has alleged that it was essentially the officers planted the gun. And there were some discrepancies in trial regarding was there a gun or not, to which the jury found him not guilty.
So the jury believed that the gun was planted, or we can't say that explicitly, but at least there was some level of concern that a gun was found, but somehow the jury didn't convict him of having a gun.
Correct. It was more of conflicting evidence.
It was conflicting evidence. Right? And what was the extent of his injuries?
Gunshot wound to the right upper chest, between the shoulder blade and chest, to which he had to undergo surgery and subsequent treatment, physical therapy, and the like while in prison.
Was there body worn camera for this particular incident?
I don't believe, based on my investigation, not that I'm aware of.
No,
So-
sir, there was not.
There was not. And the officer that yelled gun, that officer still sustains that he saw a gun that the victim, we're calling him a victim because we're giving him a settlement today, that this individual produced, and he screamed gun. He's still, or she's still saying that that's the case.
Officer Harrison, yes.
Because of the outcome of this case and where we are with the settlement, is there any additional internal action from the police department to investigate the circumstances surrounding this particular case?
There was internal investigations, and I'll defer to my colleague, Ms. Walden, if she see fit to respond.
Good morning, Council President. As is the case universally in cases of police-involved shootings, the Department Special Investigation Response Team was deployed to this scene. They did investigate this incident, and they did conclude that the officer's conduct comported with policy. As the Deputy Solicitor mentioned, there was in this case no body-worn camera. Of course, this dates back to 2016. And I would just add for the awareness of the board that this type of incident, an officer-involved shooting, is very explicitly the subject of requirements of the consent decree. And as a result, when that decree was entered in 2017, the department came under the supervision of the federal court with respect to these types of incidents. And so as of today, in addition to deploying the CERT team, the communications department actually notifies the consent decree implementation unit, which notifies the Department of Justice about these instances when they occur, also notifies the court's monitoring team when these instances occur. And it is very common to see the court's monitoring team appear at the scene while it is a live incident. So these are certainly incidences that are very, very well monitored at this point.
What are the details around the conflicting information associated with the gun, whether it was planted or whether the person had it in his possession?
Well, in the trial, I believe there was questions about whether the gun landed. Mr. Officer Mellows and the other officer's position was that in the ensuing of a struggle, the gun flew up and landed on the hood of the car. And there's questions as to whether a gun actually landed on the hood of the car. And so that, in addition to some other.
But a gun was recovered, right?
Yes.
From the hood of the car.
Yes.
So the question is whether who placed the gun on the hood of the car?
Conflicting evidence about whether a gun existed and was on the possession of the plaintiff at the time.
And was there other corroborating witnesses to say that it wasn't from the struggle?
All the officers indicated that they saw the gun when it was in the air, landed on the.
Were there any other third-party witnesses to this that said that they didn't see the gun come out during the struggle?
Third parties as in non-officers?
Yes, sir.
No, it was just officers on the scene and the plaintiff.
Gotcha. And then my only last question is, I assume that Officer Mello called for backup during this routine traffic stop because he was in a position to start to make the arrest, knowing that maybe the license was suspended, or why did he call for backup on a
Great question.
routine stop?
Great question. Plaintiff was speeding. There was the license plate was compromised. I guess it wasn't clearly identified, as well as they ran. I don't know when they ran the plaintiff's driver's license, but they ran the driver's license and it was invalid. Plaintiff actually told the officer that his license was suspended. So in the totality of those circumstances, it was justified to stop. It was reasonable suspicion to stop.
Thank you as always for all your details, Deputy Solicitor Ingram. At this point, are there any additional questions or concerns from other members of the board? Ms. Comptroller, I see your hand raised. I yield the floor to you.
Thank you, Mr. President. Your questioning actually made me realize there was a question I had forgotten to ask Deputy Solicitor Ingram earlier, which is kind of I'm sorry I didn't ask sooner. Were there any fingerprints on the gun?
So there were DNA evidence on the gun. Not per se fingerprints, but DNA of the plaintiff and DNA of other individuals as well, which is part of the conflicting evidence at trial.
There was DNA from the plaintiff and from others.
Yes.
Which would be understandable if there was a struggle between the plaintiff and the officers for possession of the gun. That would seem to be less likely if the gun was planted, unless the planting involved the officers pressing a gun into the hands of the plaintiff, which seems an odd way to plant a gun. And that still was not compelling information to the jury.
Well, he didn't say fingerprints. He said DNA.
Right, if there is DNA from both, then
he was shot. His DNA was all over the scene. He got shot. So I usually said pressing the hand.
Yeah,
the
I
gun
hear
on
what you're
his
I hear you
hand.
saying he could have been
That's
blood spurting from. Gotcha.
That's fingerprints.
Okay, yeah, that I'm not interested in retrying the
Yeah.
case. I was just curious.
It's kind of going towards your point. I was trying to help you with your point, Mr. Comptroller, that I think that was the conflicting potential evidence by the jurors that, it wouldn't be uncommon for this person's to have his DNA on the car, on the ground, on the porch, wherever he was shot, because he was shot and close range. So I don't know, just my quick thought of your questioning. Any other questions or concerns from members of the board?
Yeah.
Hearing and seeing none, at this point, I'll entertain a motion for the settlement of $230,000 for the plaintiff in this case.
I move approval.
Second.
It's been moved and probably seconded. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, please say nay. The ayes have it. This item is approved. Now we're going to move on to our next non-routine agenda item. It can be found on page 12, Department of Law, Settlement Agreement and Release. This is a proposed settlement in the case. Oh, I'm sorry. It's page 13. This is a settlement agreement in a case brought by Ms. Malika Peterson based on injuries sustained in 2018 when she stepped on an unsecured water meter cover. The amount of proposed settlement is $250,000, which is weird because we just came from a settlement of someone being shot for $230,000, and now we're for someone stepping on it. I'll be interested in understanding and knowing the difference of injuries. At this time, I'll again turn the floor over to the Department of Law to walk us through the settlement. Deputy Solicitor Ingram, the floor is yours.
Thank you, sir. Again, the Department of Law is requesting this honorable board to approve the settlement of $250,000 in the matter of Plaintiff Peterson against the Mayor and City Council. This is incident is arising from a fall into a water meter on the sidewalk occurring at 840 North Utah Street. If you're aware, the address is right in front of the Land of Kush on the corner of Utah Street and Pennsylvania Avenue. In this particular incident, the plaintiff walked over the water meter, to which she fell in the hood or top of the water meter caved in, and she fell in, to which she sustained an injury, a fracture to her knee, her left tibial plateau, to which she had to undergo treatment and surgery, in which she incurred special damages in the amount of $62,000. Plaintiff was then determined to have a permanent injury, in which she hired an expert to determine that she would need additional treatment and or 2 surgeries that were total an amount of $200,000 or more. So given the special damages and the feasibility that she will need to undergo additional surgery in the amount of $200,000, the settlement of $250,000 is truly in the best interest of the city to resolve this matter. With that, I'll leave. I request leave for you all to answer any questions that you may.
Thank you, Deputy Solicitor Ingram. Just kind of getting back to my opening, when we talk about the 230 versus the 250, and I know you can't compare apples to oranges. Both cases are really unique. How do we ultimately determine how much the settlement amount will be? And I only ask because in the first case, the person had to be flown to shock trauma, had to have emergency surgery. The assumption is, with, a hand, so many different tendons and nerves, to be shot in your arm could have debilitating reality for someone for quite some time. And the individual also was in prison for, I believe, 4, 5, 6 months. I don't know. How long was he in prison?
About 8 months.
8 months. He was in prison for 8 months. Now, in this case, the person is getting in the settlement $20,000 more, and how, this does seem like a problem. And I'm pretty sure that Ms. Peterson sustained some lifelong trauma and injuries associated, and this is why we're settling today. How do we come up with the actual settlement amounts?
There's an analysis. You look at previous jury awards and in cases similar to the case that you have before you. You look at the damages that a person may have incurred or ensued due to the injury, as well as any future damages as well. Pain and suffering is a major component of it, depending on how juries have awarded people in certain types of circumstances as relates to lawsuits they may have against the city. Of course, we're a government, and you have that component as well. You have sympathetic juries, depending on the venue, federal court versus state court. So it's a total assessment analysis based on previous cases, case law, and what juries may award in similar situated incidences. And then no one shoe fits all cases.
Understood. Understood. Thank you for that explanation. Again, it just seems like a person that was driving on suspended license, gets shot, has to have emergency surgery, serves 8 months in prison. It seems like that settlement in comparison to this is strange, but I don't want to go back in the future. We've already have gone through that settlement. We're on to this settlement. At this point, are there any additional questions or concerns from members of the board? Ms. Comptroller, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. Deputy Solicitor, in the course of your investigation for this, how did the cover on the water meter become open or loose in the first place?
There is no information to ascertain why. The employees indicated that they don't believe it was loose or not bolted. They have no reason to believe that it wasn't. I believe they did work on it a few days prior, and based on their work performances, they customarily bolted. So it's unknown as to why it was loosened and or unbolted.
So when the city was working on this water meter a few days before, did DPW explain why they had been working on this water meter? Like, what was the work they were doing?
Mr. Garbach, do you have any knowledge on that? As I open up my documents, give me a second, Comptroller.
Good morning, Mr. President, Mr. Mayor, Mr. Comptroller, members of the board, Matt Garbach, Deputy Director, Department of Public Works. Generally, what our meter techs, what they're doing when they go to a meter vault is they are getting, a majority of the time they are actually verifying or obtaining a read, something that may not be adding up or something in the system or a tower that may be blocked. They have to manually open the meter lid and they look at the meter to get the read. So that is usually what they're doing in there. On other occasions, it is actually replacing a meter or fixing a meter. I don't know in this particular case.
So I can answer the question. So in that time, DPW discovered discrepancies in bill tracking or tracking the bills. And upon going to that site at 842 North Utah Street, the tech discovered that the meter vault, there was no meter present at that particular location. So based on the discrepancies of them not receiving indications, tracking for bills, and then going there, they discovered there was no meter. So it was probably a process improvement initiative on behalf of DPW as to why they went there.
In terms of and this is probably for DPW again, in terms of just the standard process of opening and closing a meter vault, is there any documentation of putting the bolts back in when you close up? Do they take a picture? Do they check that off on a checklist of doing the job? Is there anything to point at after the fact to reinforce the expectation that the crew that did this actually closed up the way they were supposed to?
Thank you for that question, Mr. Comptroller. That's a great point. We have found that the documentation, as Deputy Solicitor Ingram said, has not been oftentimes sufficient to what we need to verify things. Most of our meter tech, in fact, all of our meter techs, none of them have city issued cell phones. What we are in the process of doing is actually getting them upgrading. Right now, they have a mobile handheld device for meter reading. We're actually upgrading that to new technology where they'll be using a tablet device. It has a camera on it, and we are developing SOPs for that, where for work orders, they're actually going to be taking pictures of the meter and the meter vault so that we can ensure quality control for events like this.
If you'd like to talk to telecommunications about getting city cell phones for your meter crews, I'd be happy to make that connection.
Well, thank you very much. I think the tablets will have us covered.
We'll take care of that.
Yes, sir.
So the employees who worked on this particular vault, in the aftermath of this investigation, did they receive any kind of discipline or retraining? Should I assume that they're still with the city, still doing those jobs?
I am not aware specifically of that level of detail. I think that goes to some of the record keeping as well. Some of the crews who go out, and if there's an inspection, but then they have to have more work and come back and do work, what all those touch points are. I think that goes to the record keeping issue where we need to tighten that up. And we are working on some process improvements through our city work system, which is the city work order system, having that linked directly to our billing system so that there's not a gap in between. But I think that does speak to the issues where some of that information needs to be tightened up.
I'm sorry, then maybe I misunderstood something from the deputy solicitor. I thought that you had said that you had, or somebody in your office had talked to the meter crew that was responsible for doing the work on this vault in the days before the incident.
During the course of the investigation, the attorney assigned to the case, through her investigation, that's what she discovered, that they had no reason to believe that they didn't, both of them.
But the attorney for the plaintiff identified the specific city workers who worked on that meter vault?
I don't believe they were able to identify.
Oh, okay, then that is the misunderstanding. I'm sorry, I was under the impression that we knew who had worked on the vault.
From internal investigation, internal reviews, who was at that site around that date and time. That's how the city was able to ascertain.
So we do know who worked on that vault.
Yes.
We know the crews who worked on the vault and those who were assigned to the vault over that period of time. What and who did what in that vault is not as detailed or specific to identify some of those specific issues like the deputy solicitor said.
Okay, so just want to be clear, if there's been no direct personal accountability ascribed to specific employees for allowing what we can see as a very dangerous situation to occur, and, not to be insensitive, but also fairly expensive from the city's perspective. What has DPW done to improve its processes for maintaining the vaults and documenting that maintenance so we aren't in this situation again?
Yes, I think that's the crux of all of this, and that really gets down to some of the operational issues that need to be tightened up. This past summer, we convened an overall review of meter operations as well as our billing and customer service operations, but specifically focusing on meter operations. First and foremost, we really got into some of those issues and those gaps that have been brought to light. One of them is documentation and making sure that the City Works system has a mandatory, basically as simple as mandatory fields that must be filled out, mandatory geolocations of work orders, things like that, and also automatically linking it to the billing system so that when a customer calls in of a particular issue or when a meter tech reports an issue, it can be updated in the billing system immediately. We're also creating a dedicated training position using an existing meter technician, a veteran meter technician, who will be training constantly over and over again meter techs on some of these processes and on the best practices. And we are developing a quality assurance and quality control unit that is going to be assessing sort of these issues overall going forward to ensure that we have better quality control overall. And from a policy standpoint, we're reviewing all of our current SOPs to make sure these types of issues are explicitly covered in our policies and documentation.
That's very good to hear. Thank you. Mr. President, that's all the questions I have.
Thank you, Mr. Comptroller. At this point, are there any additional questions or concerns from other members of the board? Hearing and seeing none, at this point, I'll entertain a motion.
Move approval.
It's been moved and properly seconded. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, please say nay. The ayes have it. This item is approved. We're going to move on to the next item. A non-routine agenda can be found on page 41, Department of Audits, the Baltimore City Fire Department Biennial Performance Audit for fiscal years ending in June 30th, 2020 and 2019. At this time, I recognize City Auditor, Mr. Josh Pash, to introduce his team and speak on behalf of this audit report. Mr. Auditor, the floor is yours.
Good morning, Mr. President, Mr. Mayor, Mr. Comptroller, and the members of the Board of Estimates. My name is Josh Pash, and I am the City Auditor. I am here today to present the Biennial Performance Audit of the Baltimore City Fire Department. The scope of our audit was fiscal years 2020 and 2019. The objectives of our performance audit were to assess whether the fire department has adequate and effective policies and procedures to administer and operate the Firewatch programs, and whether those policies and procedures are in compliance with the International Fire Code requirements. The other objective was to follow up on prior findings and recommendations in the audit report dated December 12, 2019. I would like to thank our audit team and the fire department staff for their efforts completing this audit. We have 3 findings and 3 follow-up items. The first item was accounting and financial controls to manage invoicing, collections, and recording of special event and level 3 Firewatch activities need improvements. The Office of the Fire Marshal does not have adequate and accounting and financial controls, for example, segregation of duties, payment deposit validation, and monitoring of outstanding invoices to ensure that billing and payment information is recorded accurately. We noted that the fire department cannot assure whether payments are received in a reasonable timeframe or at all for all invoices that the fire marshal issues. Our test found, for example, 13 of 24 special event invoice payments that selected for testing, totaling approximately 11,256. 13 of those 24 were not received, and those are invoices dating back to September of 2018. We also noted that there were segregation of duties issues. The Office of Fire Marshal does not properly segregate duties for invoicing, collecting, and recording. best practices and standards of internal control require that those be separated among different individuals, and all of those processes are centralized in the Office of Fire Marshal. We noted for invoicing and invoice processing for special events that the Office of Fire Marshal enters special event and permit invoices into the mainframe system, and it's billed through there. But collections are done strictly by the Bureau of Revenue Collections. And in the event that a payment is sent directly to the fire marshal, they send that to Merkle, which is the lockbox system. However, neither the Bureau of Revenue Collections or the fire department monitor outstanding invoices, which leads us to those 13 of 24 items not being collected. For the level 3 Firewatch for invoicing and payment processes, that is completely done in the Office of the Fire Marshal. They generate the invoices in-house, and those are recorded only in an Excel spreadsheet. They are not recorded in the mainframe system, which is the city's a citywide system, and they're not recorded in City Dynamics, which is the accounting system. And when the Office of the Fire Marshal receives those payments, those are remitted to Merkle, or they came in through Merkle. However, the Office of the Fire Marshal does not go and bring it to that monitoring step of checking the bank statement and validating that those were deposited, and that the Bureau of Revenue Collections is not involved in this process at all. So there's no one monitoring those outstanding invoices. We had a couple of recommendations for the Office of the Fire Marshal. We recommended to establish and implement procedures for these accounting functions, segregation of the invoicing, collection, and recording of the level 3 Firewatch and special events activities. We also recommended that the fire chief work with the Department of Finance to transfer the mainframe billings and the manual billings to Workday, which would give a lot more visibility and allow multiple departments to monitor this. In the case of the mainframe system, there's no overarching monitoring system, and if anything would like to be looked at in bulk, it needs to be a special request to BSID. And then to implement formal policies and procedures around those processes. For finding 2, we were looking at the documentation required by the International Fire Code, and we noted that documentation evidencing those Firewatch activities and those related services does not exist. The Office of the Fire Marshal tracks within Microsoft Excel spreadsheet to track the level 3 Firewatch activities, but they are not tracking the level 1 and level 2. They are captured in the 311 system. However, those are not differentiated. And then we also noted that the Office of Fire Marshal does not retain supporting documentation such as contracts, daily logs, citations, and work orders after 30 days, and therefore we are not maintaining the required documentation for the Firewatch activities. Our recommendation there is to basically formalize the process of how it will be retained and collected and organized. For finding 3, we noted that of the 3 levels of Firewatches, level 3 is the only one that is billed, and also the Office of Fire Marshal bills for special events. The rate that is being billed is a set rate, which was set in 2011 at $45, and that is not covering the cost of the salary rates and the overtime rates for the individuals who are working those. When we did an analysis, it was estimated that the fire department is absorbing approximately $200,000 annually for fiscal year 20 and fiscal year 19 for these level 3 fire watches and special events, which are billed at the set $45 rate, and the actual costs are more than that. Our recommendation there is to annually evaluate and revise that flat rate used for those invoicing, and then to maintain documentation supporting that review. We followed up on 3 findings. Of the 3 prior findings, 1 was fully implemented and 2 were not implemented. The 2 that were not implemented related to the emergency management and the disaster recovery plan, continuing operation plan. And we had noticed that 13 of the 24 agencies had submitted disaster recovery plans. However, none of those 13 are current because they were developed in between 2006 and 2018. And when we inquired, the MOEM had not confirmed whether those were still applicable and relevant. When looking into this further, the recommendation in the previous audit was to give some enforcement and enforcement capabilities and power to the Mayor's Office of Emergency Management in enforcing this. It was more like a voluntary process back then. We noted that the administrative manual was not updated and additional authority was not given to the Mayor's Office of Emergency Management, and therefore the performance measures of 85% for fiscal year 19 and 75% for fiscal 20 could not be achieved, and we did not make much progress in those metrics into getting the disaster recovery plans done. The other one that was not implemented was for fire code enforcement, and we weren't able to follow up on that because documentation was not available to evidence the fire department's follow-up and resolution of expired permits. And that concludes my presentation. I will be available for questions.
Thank you, Mr. Auditor. At this point, are there any questions or concerns from members of the board to Mr. Auditor or his team? Comptroller Henry, the floor is yours.
Technically not a question for the auditor. Wanted to ask, are you going to give the fire department an opportunity to speak and respond? Because my questions are really for them, but if they're going to respond, then I'll let them go first.
Yep. So the process in doing the biennial audits, we always allow our amazing auditor to go first and lay out his report and his findings. And then we ask any specific questions to those findings that we might have to him. Then we allow the department or agency to come on and provide their response to those findings. And then at that time, we'll have the opportunity to ask them for any concern. So at this point, again, are there any questions or concerns from members of the board to Mr. Auditor or his team? Hearing and seeing none, I see Chief Niles Ford on at this point. Chief Ford, the floor is yours, or any member of your team that you designate.
Yes, sir. I'd like to first defer to the Fire Marshal, Derek Reddy.
Good morning. Derek Reddy, the Deputy Chief Fire Marshal. The Office of the Fire Marshal agrees with the auditor's findings. We have policy setting. We're currently in the process of setting policies to agree with these findings or to abide by these findings. Also, Chief Ford is in the process of working with Director Raymond and the segregation of duties in reference to this audit.
I'd like to make a small correction. I haven't met with him yet. I intend on meeting with Director Raymond to move forward with this. And I'd like to also defer to our OEM Director, Jay Wallace.
Thank you, Chief. Good morning, Mr. President, Mr. Comptroller, Mr. Mayor. Since early 2020, when I came into OEM, this was a problem that was brought to my attention. I was briefed on it, and along with all of our COVID activities, I'd like to report the following initiatives that we currently have in progress to further these percentages. We're now currently working with 29 agencies to try to get Coupe plans updated, which would also be very supportive of bringing the EOP into compliance as well. We do have 14 agency Coupe reports in draft status right now that are being reviewed. We have 4 of which are completed. We have 7 right now who, as of when I came on here, I don't have an update on their status, so I'm going to indicate them as being status unknown. And I also have 6 Coupe plans that we've not received, or I'm sorry, we have 6 that we've not received Coupe plans from. Since this time, and actually I'd also like to recognize Deputy Director Malidi and Planning Section Chief Hiles, who's the project lead for this project. They can provide some historical data that I can't for you. What I can say right now is that of 14 employees that I have over here, 9 of them are engaged in updating current Coupe plans as well as the EOP. They had made prior attempts, which they can speak to, just prior to ransomware. We did make attempts during COVID. That a lot of that was related around the vaccination prioritization work group to identify a lot of the aspects needed in hopes to, at the time, fill in a lot of the gaps in the Coupe plans. We've started an initiative internally where planners are assigned a specific group of agencies, and they work directly with those agency representatives to not only provide technical assistance, but workshops, meetings, and we've also provided templates out to the agencies as kind of guidance documents to help move this forward. We also have an internal certification program where we can actually recognize city agencies and city agency employees as a kind of a quote unquote Coupe practitioner. In doing so, supplying links to training courses, FEMA training courses on exactly how to plan and build Coupe processes, but also one that actually validates the overall process in and of itself and shows it's significant to city government. So a lot of that's been put out. We've also submitted under the ARPA program for additional planners to assist with this. Those planners would be specific to the Coupe and EOP initiatives. And we're currently working with an outside vendor on a software program that we're very excited about that would basically make this whole process electronic and would put it right at the hands of the operator and would flow right through a development process. The other good aspect about this is it actually grades the outputs. So if we did receive a plan and it wasn't adequate, the system would grade it in addition to the oversight that we would be providing over here. With regard to a change in the administrative manual to bring enforcement, I guess, power, if you will, to the Office of Emergency Management. That is not something from a previous audit that I was aware of. I am aware now, and that is something that we will look into. Thank you, Mr. President.
No, thank you for the details from an OEM perspective. At this point, from the fire department, are there any additional points you would like to make in response to the audit, Chief Ford?
No, sir. Mr. President, we are very aware of the audit and we concur with the conclusions, and we're working on them.
Got it. Thank you so much. At this point, I'll turn it over to members of the board. Any questions or concerns for the Baltimore City Fire Department? Ms. Comptroller, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. President. Chief, I don't know if this is a question more for you or more for someone from the finance department, but can anybody explain to the board why the fire department's accounts receivable were being kept separate from the general ledger in the first place? Like what was the benefit of that?
Mr. Comptroller, I personally, I don't have an answer for that. It's been like that the entire time I've been here.
Good morning, Mr. President, Mr. Mayor, Mr. Controller, honorable members of the board. I'm Henry Raymond, Director of Finance. That was the longstanding operating practice, and that will be changed as we move towards the implementation of Workday.
Okay, so it's not that anybody knows that there was it was done that way a long time ago, and it just cruised. I got you. Okay.
Correct.
If there was another one, in finding number 2, it was mentioned that the fire marshal's office doesn't maintain logs or reports of level 1 and level 2 Firewatch services, which means that OFM can't substantiate the services that have been provided. With no records, how has that office or the overall department been able to measure performance?
The level ones and level 2s, fire watches are not performed by fire department personnel. They're only performed by the maintenance individuals at the occupancy. What they would do is each morning, prior to 800 hours, they would send us a copy of their log stating that they did perform the fire watch. These businesses or occupancies are only open 10 to 12 hours a day prior to a level 3, which these occupancies are operating 24 hours a day. So what we do is once their systems come up to par and they are compliant, then we take them off the level 1 and level 2 Firewatch. That's how we gauge it.
Gotcha. So if they don't turn in the log, that's just responded to immediately. So there's been no need to track that.
Yes, sir.
Gotcha. Okay. Also in finding number 3, there was a similar issue to something we saw in the police department audit last year. The auditor talked about not being able to recover the costs of the level 3 fire watches. In the response to finding 3, the Department of Finance and the fire department agreed to complete the review, analysis, and updates of applicable rates by November 1, 2021, which was Monday. Can somebody share the information with the board as a follow-up to today's meeting, what the recommended new rates are going to be?
Yes. So, again, this is Henry Raymond. We have recalculated the average hourly rate for both firefighters and fire officers and firefighters for the current fiscal year, fiscal 22. And we will be submitting the new recommended flat rate prior to the end of November. And I am able to share with you that that rate will be between $55 and $57.
Okay. And you're comfortable that the new rate will be enough to recover a substantially greater portion of the previously unrecovered expenditures?
That is correct.
Okay. All right. That's all the questions I have, Mr. President. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Comptroller. At this point, are there any additional questions or concerns for members of the Baltimore City Fire Department? I see the hand of Mr. Mayor. Mr. Mayor, the floor is yours.
Thank you. My questions are actually for Chief Lawless. Chief, let me first say thank you for coming in and being on top of the Coupe plants. And just a general question, just want to know how those are progressing with the agency, since this is something that you took the leadership role in tackling from when you took the position.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And yes, given all the obstacles we faced kind of ancillary, I believe that it's moving forward at an expected pace. Again, I'll underscore, given everything else that we're dealing with right now, I believe we have the right people in place. I do know that they have an outreach system internally where they attempt to contact agencies weekly and provide support. I'm also excited about the fact that they discovered all the training links, and those identified representatives can be trained consistent with what some of our people internally are. So although I would like to see the progress pick up a little bit, I always feel good about the fact that we continue to inch forward, we continue to move forward. So I would say at this point, I'd like it to get better, Mr. Mayor, but we're definitely showing progress. And with your permission, Chris Hiles, if you have anything, or my deputy director, they're a little bit closer contact to this initiative than what I am, sir.
Thank you, Chief. Jennifer Malady, Deputy Director of Office of Emergency Management. Just would like to add that this is just one more task for agencies that don't have dedicated personnel to perform these planning tasks. So we do understand that it's just one more thing added to their plates, and it's difficult to find personnel who can dedicate their time to these planning tasks. So I just would like to recognize that as well.
Thank you.
Are there any additional questions or concerns from members of the board? Hearing and seeing none at this point, we'll just note the report as done and officially noted, and we're going to move on. No additional questions, right? Thank you again to our auditor and to your team, as well as to members of Baltimore City Fire Department. The next and final item on the non-routine agenda can be found on pages 67 and 68, contract number 08000, Shotspotter Annual Subscription Services, Mayor's Office of Criminal Justice, requisition number R879222. This item would extend the city subscription to Shotspotter through July of 2022 at the cost of $759,500. At this time, I would like to turn the floor over to representatives from the Baltimore Police Department and the Mayor's Office of Neighborhood Safety and Engagement to speak on behalf of this item. So whoever's up first, whether it's from BPD or Muncie, the floor is yours.
Hi, this is Eric Mawson, Chief of Staff for the Baltimore Police Department. With me today is Director Jonte Jackson from Muncie and our Deputy Chief of Detectives, Lieutenant Colonel Jack Herzog. Before you, of course, is that request for contract renewal for Shotspotter program, the amount of $759,500 for the next fiscal year, for the current fiscal year. This is an important investigative tool for the BPD. It's been around since 2018. It uses a series of audio sensors to alert our officers of gunfire. That's improved our response time for these incidents and helps us more accurately and more quickly locate victims of gun violence and ballistic evidence around these incidents. BPD is here to provide additional context and data on the program's performance. At this time, I'd like to turn it over to Lieutenant Colonel Herzog to provide a summary of the program's efforts and operational effectiveness. And I or Director Jackson will be able to respond to any questions asked about the contracts administration itself. So at this time, with the board's permission, I'd like to give it over to Lieutenant Colonel Jack Herzog.
Thank you, Chief, and good morning. Thank you, Mr. Mayor, Mr. Chair, and members of the board for the opportunity to be here today to advocate for Shotspotter. It's a tool that the Baltimore Police Department feels is extremely valuable. Again, I'm Lieutenant Colonel Jack Herzog, the Deputy Chief of the Baltimore Police Department's Criminal Investigation Division. And Shotspotter, as Chief Melanson just mentioned, is a gunshot detection technology that uses acoustic sensors to detect, locate, and alert police about illegal gunfire in real time. And this technology, it aids us in several ways. This technology helps police because it alerts us directly. And to me, this is where Shotspotter provides its biggest value. For example, we have found since the inception of Shotspotter in May of 2018 through the summer of this year, that 88% of the incidents of shots being fired did not have a corresponding 911 call. And so this means that nobody was calling 911 to report that shots were being fired, and if it wasn't for Shotspotter, we would never have known about these particular incidents. And so this allows our officers to collect ballistic evidence that we otherwise would not have known about. In 2020 alone, the BPD collected 4,935 pieces of ballistic evidence as a result of incidents with Shotspotter alerts. Shotspotter also improves officer safety. Shotspotter, which officers can access directly on their cell phones, provides them with the exact locations, the number of rounds being fired, for the potential number of shooters, and the possibility of a high-capacity magazine. And so not only does this improve officer safety, but as the chief mentioned earlier as well, it enhances response times for Code 1 priority calls for service. For Code 1 priority calls, BPD has an average of 5 minutes for response times, whereas with Shotspotter alerts, the response time is approximately 1 minute on average. So enhanced response times, they allow us to get to the scene faster, render aid to victims, and ultimately save lives. Collecting ballistic evidence aids investigators because it can produce NIBIN leads. NIBIN is the National Integrated Ballistic Information Network, and this network allows us to compare ballistic evidence to aid in the solving of gun-related crimes. In 2020, 52% of all ShotSpotter incidents had a NIBIN link. And since 2020, there have been 137 ShotSpotter alerts, which were associated with homicides, and 29 of the incidents are closed or have a warrant for the offender. NIBIN links help investigators by linking cases, producing additional investigative leads, but they also provide us with strong intelligence that cases are connected, and they aid in identifying the most prolific firearms in a particular community. ShotSpotter also allows us to locate crime scenes when investigating walk-in shootings at hospitals with uncooperative witnesses, victims, and no corresponding 911 calls. In this instance, ShotSpotter is a tool that directs the officers to the locations where the incidents potentially occurred so that the evidence can be recovered, thereby increasing the quality and the thoroughness of the investigation. It also enhances our time management. Officers can use a ShotSpotter to go directly to the locations where the shots were fired, save canvas time, and therefore providing a more efficient use of limited resources. It affords us the opportunity to deploy resources to where ShotSpotter alerts are occurring, using ShotSpotter alerts to make data-driven decisions. The Western District, as many of you on this know, is the pilot district for the Baltimore's Crime Gun Intelligence Center, also known as CGIC. One of the primary tenets of the Crime Gun Intelligence Center pilot in the Western District is, again, the collection of evidence. However, another primary focus of CGIC is outreach. After every ShotSpotter alert in the Western District, which there have been 693 of so far this year, officers and K-9s respond to those areas within 24 hours to search for additional evidence and also perform community engagement. During this process, which not only shows officers out in the community, the officers will provide information on how to submit tips and information about the gun-related crimes which took place in this particular area, which they're there for. Without ShotSpotter, many neighborhoods would not be getting the same level of response following a gun-related incident. We simply wouldn't know about it. In 2021, so far, there have been 56 instances where our K-9 unit in the Western District has recovered additional evidence that stemmed from ShotSpotter or another gun-related incident. And so overall, ShotSpotter is a tool that is used by all members across operations in the Baltimore Police Department, and it really has truly become part of the culture of our agency. ShotSpotter allows the unknown to become known. And so again, I want to thank you for the opportunity this morning to advocate for ShotSpotter. I'll turn it back over to Chief Melanson. Thank you.
At this time, I would defer to Director Jackson if she has any further remarks about the program's administration, and then we'll open it up for questions, if that's okay. Director Jackson.
Thank you, Chief. Good morning, Mr. Mayor, Mr. President, Mr. Comptroller, and members of the board. As you heard from BPD, 4 years ago, we made the decision to fund ShotSpotter to help them with response times and investigations and providing assistance to victims. I would offer that now we have the opportunity to leverage the technology in a multi-agency, multi-pronged way. Research shows us that when children and teenagers hear gunshots, that the chemistry in their brains change, with their cognitive and emotional development being severely impacted. In fact, one of the studies that my office has looked at has found that 65% of our young people who are indirectly exposed to community gun violence by hearing gunshots or witnessing a shooting reported becoming extremely distressed. The majority of those exposed reported negative changes to their behavior, like being less likely to go outside alone, avoiding certain locations, staying at home from school altogether, and carrying guns for protection. It's also been found to lead to these young people being physically inactive, exhibiting antisocial behaviors, acting aggressively, and performing poorly in schools. In Baltimore, we know that there are many times when a weapon is discharged in a neighborhood and there's no reported victim. Monty's currently creating the infrastructure for a coordinated neighborhood stabilization response that, when it's fully deployed, plans to use Shotspotter technology to zero in on neighborhoods where there are both discharges and shootings. So, and this effort won't just leverage Shotspotter technology, it's also going to use 211, 311, and 911 data to determine what agencies, what community-based organizations, and other community-based assets should be engaged to work directly in these neighborhoods in a trauma-informed way to provide mental health supports, social service supports, and community supports for prolonged periods of time. Finally, I would offer that Monty plans to use Shotspotter and our CBI work to reduce the likelihood for retaliation. We know from the problem analysis that we just completed in the Western District that retaliation has driven more than 50% of our shootings between 2020 and May of 2021. Happy to answer any questions that you all might have.
Thank you, Director Jackson. I see the hand of the mayor. Mr. Mayor, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. President, and thank you all for your presentation. Let me start off by saying that, and I think that Colonel Herzog and the Chief of Staff know this probably more than anyone, that I am the biggest skeptic of ShotSpotter. But saying that, and also knowing that this is the final renewal for this contract, and as I have already directed city staff to do a in-depth analysis of this tool, its impact, and ways that we can improve outcomes for the remainder of the fiscal year for this, but also looking at whether we should continue in the future. I think that Director Jackson, I think you for your dedication to looking at ShotSpotter in a different way. That's something for me that is very encouraging. I do, Colonel Herzog, agree that this really, for me, is about getting to people who are the victim of gun violence, who no one is calling for. And I just want folks to imagine laying in an alley or in the street where you can't call for yourself and you're bleeding and no one calls for you. We have to think about that, right? When you think about that number, that 88% of the incidents are not being reported to 911. We have to go beyond the ballistics, which is a great thing, to community uses, and we will be looking at this tool in a more in-depth way as we move forward in the future. And my only question for both you, Mr. Chief, and you, Madam Director, is about how we have you guys thought about how you can better partner between MONSE and BPD around not just the ShotSpotter incidents, but around those particular neighborhoods that is happening in, and how we can all work together to think about the totality of not just the gun violence, but everything that comes along with it.
Chief, I'm happy to take this one. Thank you for your question, Mr. Mayor. And I'll just briefly say here, as the mother of a son who got shot at 20 coming home, no one called 911 for him. He called us first after being shot. Fortunately, he was able to do that, and then we instructed him to call 911. And so this hits very personally for me in making sure that we are able to respond to victims very quickly and then provide the mental health and wraparound supports that folks need. With regard to your question, yes, sir. In fact, we've been having conversations not just with BPD, but also with the state's attorney's office and the U.S. state's attorney's office for many months now, with the meeting being scheduled as recently as a couple of days ago that involved Lieutenant Colonel Brown from a BPD perspective to make sure that we're doing this in very thoughtful ways.
Thank you. And I guess this one is for Colonel Herzog. Colonel, when you talked about those cases that we use knob and ballistics from ShotSpotter and that cases that were closed or have warrants, can you talk about how frequently you think that has been happening, not just for murders, but for non-fatal shootings and other things as well?
Yes, sir. So And the numbers that I cited were since 2020. And so I would say that's probably fairly consistent along the lines of non-fatal shootings as well. Obviously, as you know, a ton of resources go into homicide investigations, and those investigators have significantly less cases. However, the ratio is probably very similar between that and non-fatal non-fatal shootings. There's a lot that goes into those NIBIN cases. So a lot of times just being, aware of that NIBIN link, it allows us to put certain things in place. It may not lead to a closure of the case. It might lead to identifying a person of interest. It may lead to identifying a group that is potentially involved in that. And so it's, there's so many things that kind of go into those NIBIN connections that a lot of times just aren't tangible. But we can use that as evidence to be able to direct our resources if you kind of understand where I'm coming from, Mr. Mayor, on that. But essentially the Shotspotter allows us to collect more shell casings, which produces more NIBIN leads, which provides our investigators more leads to follow up on. And that's kind of the chain of how I like to describe that and the value of Shotspotter at the very beginning of that chain.
Thank you. That's it for me, Mr. President.
No, thank you, Mr. Mayor, for those questions and the follow-up from Monty and the Police Department. At this point, are there any additional questions or concerns from other members of the board? Ms. Comptroller, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. President. Lieutenant Colonel, I want to follow up on that last bit about the NIBIN information because I followed the conceptual that ShotSpotter gives us more ballistic information in general, and in general, ballistic information is very helpful in either closing cases or at the very least developing leads and sometimes connecting cases. But what I'm looking for is, does your current case management system allow you to track the NIBIN information as coming from ShotSpotter? Do you have a way of looking at all the cases you cleared in the last year, and you can see this many were cleared because and they had NIBIN information involved in the case, but can you see of the cases that were cleared because they had ballistic information or had ballistic information, can you see how many of those cases did we get the ballistic information because ShotSpotter led us to the scene? And if you can't do that with the current case management, is that something that can be worked in to the upgrades that I know you're looking at?
Yes, sir, absolutely. And that's a great question. So we are currently in the process of building out our new case management. And so that's going to be something that we are going to include in that to incorporate ShotSpotter more directly into that. As you're well aware, we're working with some very antiquated case management systems. And that's being friendly about how antiquated they are. But what I would say...
We've still got paper over here, sir. I understand completely.
No, absolutely. But what I will say is that, so we do have the ability within our current case management to link NIBIN leads to cases. So as we get new NIBIN leads coming in, we link those to those cases that they connect to. But as far as that NIBIN lead coming from a ShotSpotter alert, it's not indicated. And also, a lot of times when we recover those shell casings, that particular case will get reclassified if there is no victim as a discharging. So when I look at those NIBIN leads, it'll say discharging. It won't say ShotSpotter alert. So it would, it requires an extra layer of kind of digging into that particular case number to see if it generated as a ShotSpotter alert. However, since our new case management system will be directly integrated with our RMS system, we will be able to see that, moving forward. And as I said, we're building that out as we speak. So this is kind of a great time for that conversation for us to incorporate that into there.
Okay. Also, the mayor already told us that he was the biggest skeptic of this program. I actually wasn't a skeptic of the program when it was proposed. I thought it was an intriguing concept, but I wanted to actually see some metrics. I wanted to see some results in terms of data as we move forward. And I'm glad that you have been able to provide the data that you have. And I look forward to you being able to refine the case management so you can provide even more. But I have to tell you, Director Jackson, I am actually more enthused now than I was 4 years ago about how your office is going to be able to use the information developed by this, because that number, the 88% number, is probably the first thing that we need to focus on. Is that so much of our city, so many of our neighborhoods have become, I don't want to say desensitized, but maybe that is the appropriate term. And the fact that you can hear a gunshot and tell yourself, well, I don't know exactly where it's coming from, and I don't know exactly where it is. And if I call the police or call 911, they're going to ask me where, and I'm not going to be able to tell them. So I'm just not going to bother. And the fact that everybody who thinks that, so few of them think about, what does that mean? You know, did that gunshot mean that somewhere somebody is lying on a street and nobody is calling for help for them? So I really appreciate the fact that Monty is going to be taking this information and using it to, I think your expression was to put your arms around the neighborhoods that are being most negatively impacted. Can you share with the board some of the specific tactics that Monty is looking to use to help the communities that have been, or that are being negatively impacted by the shootings?
Absolutely. We have completed a process map for what this is going to look like and are in final stages with regard to approving it. When I talk about a multi-pronged, multi-day approach to this, we are talking about using data that BPD will provide to our offices to determine, in partnership with the 211, 311, and 911 data that we mine, to determine what city agencies should be mobilized, to determine what community-based organizations should be mobilized, and what assets in that particular neighborhood look like, so that anywhere from 14 to 45 days, a particular neighborhood would see a prolonged engagement with those agencies, community-based organizations, and assets. Happy to share more in detail offline with you, sir.
Okay, thank you. Colonel Herzog and I already had the exchange about changes to case management to be able to focus on specific ways of tracking information. Have you identified yet any specific kinds of data or ways that it's tracked that would benefit what Monty is trying to do, but is not part of the current process, such that the police department can work with you for making changes or upgrades in case management?
Not yet, sir. What we're looking to do is pilot 4 specific types of traumatic events in our neighborhoods. The first being anytime that there's a police involved shooting. The second being anytime we see multiple victims in the same event. The third is when we see the shooting or homicide of a young person, 18 or under. And then finally, anytime we see a major law enforcement takedown happen in a community that could potentially result in a power vacuum that could erupt into something in the coming weeks, days, or months. And then we'll be looking to expand the pilot out from there using additional Shotspotter information around discharges without a follow-up investigation by BPD being necessary.
Okay, Mr. President, that's all the questions I had. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Comptroller. At this point, are there any additional questions or concerns from other members of the board? Hearing and seeing none. From a council perspective, very supportive of the mayor and the administration's role is using this as a tool in the crime fight. We know that the mayor of Baltimore, as well as the police commissioner, have a really challenging job of really reversing the tide of a problem that's been going on in Baltimore my entire life. There's an expectation by all that we're going to move in the right direction. I know that the mayor utilizes this as a variable in that fight, and the council stands ready in support and partnership with the mayor. We look to have informational hearings with Monty as well as police department to go over some of that amazing data that was brought up today. I think it's really important from a transparency and accountability perspective that citizens know those types of data, because there's so much information that's out there on the web that's contradictory to some of the stats and the data that you guys were able to bring forth today. At this point, are there any additional questions or concerns from members of the board? Hearing none, I'll entertain a motion.
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved and properly seconded. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Those opposed, please say nay. The ayes have it. This item is approved. There being no additional business before the desk, the board will recess until bid opening at 12.
Mr. President?
I'm sorry.
I have one more thing. One more
I
thing.
yield the floor to you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. President. As you know, Mr. Comptroller, we have a solemn announcement today to make. After serving the city of Baltimore for 37 years, which happens to be the same amount of years that I've been alive, Director Henry Raymond has announced that he will be retiring effective March the 31st, 2022. First of all, of course, the finance director would retire in a fashion that will give us a lot of time to replace such a man who has led in service in such a deep way, who will leave big shoes to fill, not just in the physical sense, but absolutely in the way that he has carried out his job, making sure, shepherding us through the past 8 budgets. And as you both know, the past 8 budgets have not been budgets where there was easy times during that time. Director, I want to say publicly, and we'll have more time to celebrate you over the next few months, thank you for your service to the city. Thank you for always being, even before becoming a director, someone that council people, folks, elected officials like myself could come to not just get answers, but to get solutions to problems. We know that you have put the city in a much better financial place than we would be if it were not for your leadership, shepherding us into the 21st century with Workday and other things, getting us out of paper, as the comptroller was mentioning earlier, and want to personally thank you for your 3 decades, nearly 4 decades of service to the city of Baltimore. You will be missed, and as you already know, you have to help us find your replacement and make sure that they are someone of your stature or greater.
Thank you very much for your comments, Mayor Scott. I'd like to say to the Board of Estimates, thank you for your support and guidance. Mr. Mayor, specifically, I want to thank you for allowing me to be a member of your administration and cabinet. I would like to say thank you to the Department of Finance staff for their support and hard work. To the citizens of the city of Baltimore, I would like to say it has been an honor to serve you. And finally, to all of our city agencies, I would like to say thank you for your support in our fiscal processes, as we have done everything we can to try to make our great city a better place to live and a better place to work. So I thank you. And in closing, I will be here through March 31st, and I will continue to do what I do until the very end. So again, thank you very much.
Well, I think I can speak for other members of the board. We all share the same sentiment that the mayor has laid out. Director Raymond, you've always been extremely responsive, extremely knowledgeable. But outside of the whole financial expertise that you bring to the table, your level of compassion and care for the citizens of Baltimore, and the passion in which you take into your job every single day does not go unnoticed. So you will be missed. I'm glad that the mayor has said that he's going to hold you responsible for helping him and supporting him and identifying who the next Henry Raymond is. But you have been a true treasure to the citizens of Baltimore. And from the entire council, we'd like to extend our thank you and appreciation for you.
Thank you very much.
At this point, are there any other questions or concerns before we adjourn? Hearing and seeing none, there being no new business before the desk of the board, we will recess until bid opening at 12 noon. The Board of Estimates will recess next. Are we in recess next week? Yeah. All right. The Board of Estimates is in recess next week, so you guys get a break. All right. And we'll reconvene on Wednesday, November the 17th at 9 a.m. I'd like to thank everyone for tuning in. Baltimore, we love you.